and get started.
So thank you everyone for joining us this morning for our presentation on the expanded learning opportunity grant, the ELO grant that the Office of Public Instruction is putting out for opportunities for those who are interested in doing summer programming and after school programming. My name is Wendy Fons. I'm the ESSER and EANS Director for the Office of Public Instruction. And we will, throughout this presentation, give you the opportunity to ask questions. Feel free to raise your hand or just ask them. And at the end, we'll also have an opportunity for questions and answers as well. Next slide, please. Our information is posted on our website. We will always have this slide available on all the slide decks for future viewing. I think probably most of you have had conversations, both phone and email, with both Rebecca and I, but here is again our information for you to tag into. So to begin with, I want to start with what the goals of this session are. So we're going to go over what the actual grant is, the ELO grant, program eligibility and requirements, the timeline, availability of funding. We're going to really talk about the scope document because that's a very important part of this grant. And then we're going to talk about EGrants, the manner in which the Office of Public Instruction manages these grants. So how to get in, how to process your grant, your cash request, how all of that looks on a screen view. Rebecca's done a great job of a lot of screenshots so you can see what it should look like. And how to process those. And then we'll wrap up with some resources that the Office of Public Instruction has and other resources. And again, question and answer session if you have follow-up questions. So when we start with the overview of what this grant is, it is actually an extended and expanded learning opportunity grant. So it's focused on a time period that falls outside of the school day or the traditional school day. Initially, there was 3.8 million for the extended or the after school and 3.8 million for the expanded or summer programming time. And so the funding streams for this grant have to be kept separate. However, we have combined them together in an application process. So there is only one application that is required. The funding streams or the way in which you use the funds do have to be maintained separately. So the time periods in which those funds can be used is separated out into trimesters. There is a frequently asked question document produced by the Department of Ed under the big umbrella of ESSER. So both of this grant came, both the 3.8 expanded and 3.8 extended came underneath that ESSER grant. And you can actually search for those words, the expanded time, summertime, and extended time, school time, after school time, through that document. And that's a really good way to kind of say, what can I use these funds for? It's pretty well anchored in that document. This particular grant, the one that we're running right now, the ELO grant, is focused on literacy and math. It doesn't mean that you can't have social emotional goals as well. But the focus is literacy and math. There is one application and again, two funding sources. The grant application will be applied through EGrants. So the starting point for that is you really need to have what is called an LE number. So it's sort of a identification number for you as an entity entering into a grant portal. And then you'll be given a username and access point to go into your EGrants. If you already have an LE number, you should be able to look at this application already via a drop down on the fiscal year 2021. And I know that seems a little bit odd because we're in the year now 23, but it has to do with when the funding came through, which would have been in 21. So the drop down year for this grant is 2021. Funding will go through August 31st of 2023. So you have to finish out all of it. If you're doing a summer portion, you will have to finish all of that by the end of August, so the end of summer. And the final expenditure reports, which are due for every grant that you do in EGrants through the federal government, that is an expenditure report. That is due at the end of September, that 25th mark. And there's also a data collection or an outcome report that's also due. Let me go back to that slide just once. Thank you. Are there any questions on this? Leave it up there for just a minute. So. Okay, next slide. So looking at the eligibility for this ELO grant, we want to look at who are the students who are being targeted in it. And this is that 40% low income, so that free and reduced. There are about 4 different ways you can qualify students for this. And it's looking at your student population and saying who's at greatest risk. There are other indicators of greater risk, but this is one of them. And so this is the tag that's being used for this grant. We also want to see that your organization has been in existence and done extended and expanded learning type programs for at least 3 to 5 years, that you have active partnerships. So this is an important piece of this grant, that you have partnerships in funding, programming, and or staff. So let me give you a few examples of what that might look like. You might have a 4-H group that's located near you, or one of your teachers who's going to be teaching in the summer school program is also a 4-H club leader. And they have resources to the extensive programming documents that 4-H has. They're generally free. And that teacher for the summer program is going to be using some of that 4-H curriculum as part of a cooking class that's going to focus on math. Thereby, you're showing programming partnership. Another opportunity on a funding partnership might be a local grant agency like the Dennis Washington Foundation, who is supporting the I Graduate Montana grants. And you're going to do a college and career summer program or after school program, and you're utilizing part of the Dennis Washington grant funds for the material or for helping to pay for staff for this program. Is there a question? Okay. So the partnership is very important to demonstrate. Within the scope document, there's a place to identify partners. And so the partners are not just funding, but it can be in programming, material, guest speakers. It can also be in staffing the program. So it could be in many different ways. Again, the focus is on math and literacy in that academic component, but it doesn't mean that other components, other goals that you may have for the program don't exist. You can put those in as well. You do need to have a pre and post test for the students, and you can upload that as part of your scope. We did see that last year for the summer enrichment grant. And again, using the example of cooking, if your cooking program running 6 to 8 weeks is going to be highlighting fractions, you can simply do a test up front to say, what are your participants, your student participants, what's their knowledge base going in with fractions, and what's their knowledge base going out with fractions. So it can be a very targeted pre and post test. It does not have to be a ACT, SAT, Smarter Balance type larger type testing or assessment. Evidence-based services and the delivery method need to also be demonstrated, and there are a bunch of links that we have later on. So if you're doing cooking and you're going to target math, there is lots of literature that shows that those two are linked together in evidence-based practices. Goals and objectives need to connect to standards. So what is it that we're trying to target here on the math and the reading side? And demonstrate connection to the local district's ESSER plans. So that's something that's also important. You do want to look at the plans that are on your district sites, or that are, if you're a outside district organization, you can go to all the school districts that might have students who'd participate, and you can look at their plans and say, oh, these districts are focusing on this math. So my program is going to either match that. That would be one way to show the connection, or to say, no, it's not going to match because the school district is not providing this focus. We are going to provide this focus. So you can really connect that in 2 different ways. but we want to show demonstration of the fact that you've gone in and looked at those plans. So again, partnership with the school is that you're helping them meet their goals. The after school and summer enrichment grant previous awardees do need to finish the final expenditure report and the grant outcome reports in order to submit their ELO grant. So that's an additional requirement for those who are going to be applying for the ELO grant.
Wendy, we have a question in the chat. Does computer science, we do use math, but can we use our pre-post computer science survey, or do we need to add specific math concepts also to that survey?
That's a really good question. So the question is, can we use a computer science oriented pre-post test as a math tag? Computer science does obviously relate to math in terms of its logic and sequencing. I'd have to look at the test to see how closely it could be pulled and connected to the math. I'm guessing it can. So, you know, if you send me a sample and say, here's what it looks like, we can probably look at that and make a determination. Again, on any of these grants, you are more than welcome to send Rebecca and I an email and say, you know, here's what I'm planning to submit. What do you think? We're welcome to look, we're glad to look at that for you and give you some feedback.
We also have some questions about the grant timeline. We're going to answer that in just a couple slides here. So I see your question. We're not ignoring you. We'll answer it in just a second.
Okay, next slide. So other funding considerations that you may want to look at. These funds are intended to enhance and grow Montana's capacity for our education. And so grantees are responsible for looking at the supplement, which is add-on, versus supplant, which is take the place of requirements. So there are some funding sources that say you cannot supplement or you cannot supplant, and you want to look at that from the standpoint of those other grants. Those requirements may be specific to one or the other of those categories. Additionally, in looking at how we're awarding these grants, we may give first priority to those who do not already receive 21st century, ESSER 1, 2, 3, Perkins, et cetera. However, again, the more that you show partnership in your granting, that may not come into play. So just look at that. We're aware of the fact that grant funding can be what's called braided together. It's often something you don't want to blend together. And again, that's keeping separate funding streams. The target student population, again, for that extended and expanded learning opportunity grant shall be to provide the funds to reach students who lack the typical supports that are necessary and particularly have been impacted by COVID. So that's really the target that we're looking at. Again, that free and reduced lunch, the low income, those at-risk students who may have been most hit by COVID and the pandemic situations that occurred.
We have another question in the chat. It says, we are a CBO and the school we serve has agreed to partner with us with curriculum, etc., but they require a MOU, a memorandum of understanding, to share information. Does OPI have an MOU we can use?
So a template in terms of what you can use. If you send that to me in an email, I'm sure I can find something that's a standard draft. They can be pretty simple. So that's a good idea to have that as a MOU with anybody that you partner with. Good question. So when we look at the timeline, so I know that was one of the questions that was answered. There's some timelines that are there for the grant itself. And then there are also timelines that are there for EGrants. And there are also timelines that are there for fiscal processing. So I'm going to go through a couple of those. So first of all, the grant outcome reporting is required. And the final expenditure report must be done by that September 25th deadline. We really encourage entities when they're applying for a grant that when they're finished using the funds, they close it out. You really don't want to be waiting. If you're finished in, all of June, you don't really want to wait until August to submit. All kinds of things can happen that last week when you get ready to do the submitting and you're up against a deadline. So the final expenditure report, just think of it as at the end of your grant, when you are finished with the services provided, and the expenditures have been finished, that's when you want to do that final expenditure report. You want to make sure that's out the door. The same thing is true with those outcome data reports. You really don't want to wait 3 or 4 months down the line after the grant and all the services have been provided to then go out and review. So what were our outcomes? You want to really be doing that along the way, and right at the end, when you get those pre and post, when you get the post surveys, you want to be able to upload those and do the data that's necessary at that point and not wait. So the date on those two will depend on whether or not you do only a spring, only a summer, or you do both grant opportunities. Remember, this is one grant application, but you're able to use the funds for the spring of 23, summer of 23, and those are two different final expenditure reports and two different outcome reports. So if you only did one, if you only did spring, then in June, at the end of June, we would suggest, or even the middle of June, we would suggest that you finish both of those reports from a timeline standpoint. Funding and allocation in EGrants is drawn down through cash requests. So cash requests, this grant is not, the funds are not just immediately given to you and you draw down from your side and report at the end. A cash request is a reimbursement that's used through EGrants to get you the funds. So you do need to process those in a timely manner. Our EGrants and internal operational process is they need to be submitted by the 25th of each month, and then we will process them by the 10th of the following month. So you can see if you stockpile these all through the summer and you expect to be able to pay all the staff at the end of the summer, say September 1st, if you're stockpiling them and you don't get your cash requests in by the 25th, that won't happen. So just kind of look at those timelines and kind of keep that in some kind of a calendar part and have as a reminder. Funds must be expended between the September 22 and the August 23 timeframe. So the portal opened on the 23rd of December, and the portal will close for this grant on January 20th for the application. The grant award notification by February 17th, 2023. So we'll be able to send you, if you apply by the 20th, you've been awarded by this date. And the outcome reporting will be in that May and September, depending on where you are, which grant you're using, or both. And the grant cycle will end September 23. Cash requests due no later than September 25th for the summer programs. Final expenditure report due no later than October 25th. So there's a little bit of a leeway in there. Any questions on the timeline that haven't been answered through this?
We have a question in the chat that asks about will funding be available for fall of 2023 or just for spring and summer of 2023?
Fall of 23 will fall into the next cycle of the ELO grant, and we will open that up, we hope, in the summer. So depending on funding, and that's part of what's going on here, is that we have a limited amount of funding to use, and it has to be used in those two different pockets. In other words, even if we have fewer applicants and fewer expenditures on the summer funding stream, we cannot pull that funding stream into the fall. It has to only be used during the summer. Likewise, the funding stream for the fall and spring.
Another question that relates to the grant timeline asks, do the after-school classes need to be done by August 31st?
The after-school classes need to be done by June 1st. So after school is anchoring on the school day being extended. So it's that 9 months period and your day is being extended. The summer portion is dealing with an expanded year. Did that clarify that? I know that can get a little how to separate those two out, especially since they both use the word E at the beginning.
Yep. They said yes, that answered their question.
Okay,
All right.
next slide. So when we look at how these funds are being allocated, we've got a $15,000 per trimester allocation. We've got a fall of 2022, a spring of 23, and a summer of 23. And those are the time periods in which the funding can be used. So even though we're letting you know in February 17th, you've been awarded, let's say, you can still go back to January and use it for that time period. There would be very few exceptions that the fall 22 funding would be available. We put it on there only because we had the word trimester, and technically trimester could go from that time period. It would be very unusual for you to be able to do that. If you think you can, feel free to reach out to us individually on that. The entities who received the ARP after school grant, so this is those of you who still may have money remaining from that. These are some of the additional things to consider. If you have remaining amount is over 15,000. So if at the end of December, you still had more than 15,000 in that grant to spend, and if you are awarded the ELO grant, so you apply and you are awarded that grant, and if you have completed your 2 reports, the final expenditure report and the grant outcome, then there is the ability to move those remaining funds into the spring trimester. Only the springtime trimester, we have to keep the funding stream separate. And it would not be in combination with the 15,000 award. It would be in place of the 15,000 award. Therefore, it would just be a way to extend those funds into the spring. Any questions on that?
We do have a question that relates to summer. So the question says, what happens if we apply for summer and we are granted funds, but ultimately we can't fully staff the program, so we need to cancel it or cancel a portion of it? Do we return the unused portion of funds without any penalty?
Boy, that's a really interesting question. I appreciate that. So to answer the ending part of that question, do you get a penalty? No, there'll be no penalty that's associated with not expending all the funds. There are a couple of different options that could be explored at that point. If you don't have enough staffing to run the program and you're concerned about that now, I think the best way to handle that would be to work with us to help you get some of that staffing. I do know that there are a lot of organizations in Montana, Vista just being one of them, the AmeriCorps Vistas, that can really help staff, especially summer programming. A little bit more challenging on the after school, that extended day, but the expanded, that summer time frame is pretty doable. But I'm just thinking, if you would not, you potentially would lose the funding, so you wouldn't, if you can't spend it all, you might lose it at that point. You might be given the same opportunity to move it forward into another summer program, but I don't know that that would be an advantage. So I think on the first part of that question of what do you do with staffing challenges, reach out to us separately and let's look at where you are and how we might be able to help you get the staffing. Our OPI's biggest goal in this grant and really focusing on the Department of Ed's reason for this kind of grant is really to encourage entities to focus on your local needs of the students in your community who are most impacted by COVID. And so to the extent that you can use some creative programming and really target that, this is a very beneficial startup grant.
Thank you.
So entities who receive the after-school grant and have leftovers, you have to close the after-school grant by submitting the 2 forms, again, the final expenditure report and the final grant data report. And and no, then the request of the funds for the FER need to be done. And yes, you're going to go to the next question. So this is kind of a either or what's happening, try branching out. And is the total leftover money, you want to ask yourself, do you have more or less than 15,000 left? If you have more, then you want to apply for the ELO grant and use the leftover to build your ELO budget. So that's an option that's available to you. If you have 20,000 left over, if you have 25,000 left over, you probably want to use that as your budget for the ELO, providing you are granted that, you're awarded. If you have less, then there wouldn't be an advantage because the $15,000 would be more for you. So you want to ask yourself that question. Do you have money left over? Have you completed the requirements before you move forward? Next slide. Do we have a question?
I think this will help to answer that question.
Okay. So here's some scenarios. I have 0 left in the after school and I've closed the after school grant. The solution there is apply for the ELO spring and the summer. So those 2 trimesters, that's what we would advise you to do. I have 10,000 left in my after school and I've closed the after school. Apply for the $15,000 ELO spring. So you're not going to do the summer. You only have 10,000 left. The 15,000 that you could get is higher than the 10,000. I have 10,000 left in after school and I haven't closed my after school grant. So you haven't done the FER reporting. You want to request in the after school final expenditure report. You want to close that grant out before you apply. And you're going to apply then afterwards for the $15,000 ELO grant. I have $20,000 left in the after school and I haven't closed the grant. You want to request reimbursement for the after school through the final expenditure and close that grant first. And then whatever is left over, you want to make that determination. Is it above or below the 15,000 mark? I have 20,000 left in the after school and I've closed my after school grant. Build your ELO grant, if awarded, on the 20,000, not the 15. So these are just some samples. We could not hit at every single one, but it's kind of a decision tree. First piece being, how much money do you have left if you are an after-school awardee? And do you want to apply for the new grant? Any follow-up?
Sorry. We've got a question in the chat. There is some confusion about the timeline of the previous after-school grants. So we were awarded the after-school grant in early 2022. The grant duration, as we understood it, was through October 2023. We built our budget based on having funds through October 2023. Our spending so far was based on the funding cycle of the grant. So why are we being asked to submit another grant application?
So the ARP after school grant timeline ended for the expenditure of the grant ended December 31st, 2022. And that was put out in several notifications. That is the deadline for the ARP after school grant is December 31st, 2022. That's when all the funds had to be expended for that grant. The ESSER grant, which is where that 3.8 million came from, that grant is awarded all the way through 2024. So the after school grant itself ended in December 31st, 2022. The parent grant that awarded the money to that funding stream was 2024. So you can right now, if you still have funding left over, you can move those funds into the spring of 2023. And that's part of the process that we just went through here is if you have extra funds left, you are welcome to do that. One thing I will say is that pretty much all communication that goes through from our office goes through EGrants, and the emails and phone numbers that are entered into EGrants and then also communication that comes in with Rebecca and I. So we have sent out a number of communications on the deadline piece, and Jeff Kirksey sent out several emails on that communication as well. If you're not getting those, please let Rebecca and I know, and we'll be glad to send you contact list, the portal that you can go in to update that. Because I think that, I know we've had some changes of superintendents and clerks, and if we don't update those systems, the emails are going out, but we may not be getting anything back that says it needs to be changed, that it's a wrong email address. And I know that happens a lot with some of the county schools as well. So just, we need to make sure those contacts are up to date.
Wendy, I'm going to go back to a slide because we have a question in the chat that we didn't quite address. So we have a question that says, our community-based organization operates 14 separate after-school sites within 4 school districts. I understand that our LE is eligible for 1 ELO grant, but is there guidance on how we can access separate funding for separate sites? Is that possible?
So again, a very good question of, if you're an entity that has multiple locations and services multiple districts or regions, you can apply for the grant separately if each one of those has a different LE number and a different nonprofit status. I'm assuming you're not a school from that description. So you need to have different nonprofit identifying numbers, and then you would just apply separately for those areas. Another way to do it would be, let's say that you are located in Missoula, but you're going to be serving 3 schools and you want to keep some separate records. You could in fact take that 15,000 and award 5,000 to each one of the groups that are going, maybe one to Target Range, maybe one to Missoula Hellgate, and maybe a third one to another entity in another targeted location. So you could, Big Sky maybe. So you could do them, divide the money out that way and say, we're spending 5,000 in this pocket, 5,000 here and 5,000 there. You could do that as well.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to go to the next slide now. I don't see new questions in the chat.
Okay. And again, that programming side of things, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to Rebecca and I and ask, how do we do this with our particular grant? When you design a grant, it's at a very high level, making assumptions because you have to generalize it. But each of you have very unique situations, and being able to fit those into the actual form, to the actual grant. If you have questions, just reach out and ask us. So the grant application itself is divided into 2 pieces. One is a scope document that is just a Microsoft Word document. You can convert it into a Google Doc if you want. It's just something for you to kind of work with, and it's textual, so you can add to it. You can add pictures to it. You can attach your pre and post test to it. We've had some really good scopes this last summer that were presented to us, but you do need to fill in some basic information. The basic information that is in here is also then able to be cut and pasted into EGrants. So it's a way to kind of massage the data and have it fit less than, the few characters that we need in EGrants, but gives you a greater ability to explain what it is you're doing. At the top, you do need to have your school or organization name and your LE number. So this should be a flag for you if you go, I have no idea what an LE number is. You will need to contact our EGrants team and get that number. And on the EGrants portal site, there is a place to get a new LE number, and you just fill out the information and you will get an LE number. Then you need to have the primary name and title of the person who's to be contacted. We really recommend that you at least have 2 people in here. Once you enter the information into EGrants, it will ask for 3. They must be unique. The main reason for this is the fact that if there's a problem in the grant, you've sent through a cash request to get reimbursed for $5,000 and you take a vacation for a month during the summer, your staff may not be paid if we can't get a hold of you to answer a question that became a challenge in the EGrants processing. So we really need on this document at least 2 names, 2 contact information, and in EGrants, we're going to ask for 3 that are unique. Phone number is important, as well as email. I love email. It's great to have things documented back and forth. But on the other side, sometimes you just need to pick up the phone and have a conversation to know, what the actual challenges are. So we do need a phone number in there. Then we want to have the project name. So part of the reason for this is that in EGrants, you need to have your name identified, but that may not be the program name. You may have this identified in a different way. And so we want this document, the scope document, to really have both your organization name, but also the program name. What are you calling it as you're referencing it out in the public? The description is really important. So the description is going to go through sort of a formula. It has, here is the problem as we see it. Here is what we've done to identify how we're going to meet that problem. And here are the steps. Here are the activities, the programs, the material that we're going to use to solve the problem. So if you recognize that there are low math scores in your surrounding community, and you wish to create a program, you've gone out and identified this need, and then you've decided you're going to create a program to help boost those scores, to help students gain greater access to math knowledge. This is how you've done it. This is how you've created a team. You've identified these are the needs, and this is the solution that you're recommending going forward. So that's your description, problem statement, how you've identified the need, and what your solution is to meet that need. Then there's the budget and funding. So you're saying the total project may be a $50,000 project, of which 15 of it is coming from this grant, another 10 is coming from another source, and another 15,000 from a third source. So you have to identify in here where those funding sources are. Timeline, that's going to tag into when are you starting and ending, and the student gains. So specifically, what do you hope? What are those outcomes that you hope specific to your students? And you want to identify 3 of those. And then you want to look at the smarter goals and objectives. And again, what are the strategies? How are you going to measure them? What are those particular goals that you have? And the focus here is, again, math and literacy. However, you can have other goals as well. You just want to make sure that you have math and literacy in that grant. If you decide that you only wish to focus on math, you may do that. If you decide you only wish to focus on literacy, you may do that. If you decide you wish to focus on both, you may also do that. If you decide that the spring is going to be math focused and summer is going to be literacy focused, you may do that as well. So you have a lot of options within that. I did have, as way of an example, an organization that is looking at doing literacy by reading books that have to do with math. There are a lot of K-6 books that are stories that engage students in the vocabulary of math. And we all know that math is not just numbers, it is actual words as well. And so the literacy really builds into the math component. And that's one way that they're looking at addressing both. I thought that was a very creative way to do it. Mm-hmm. Partnerships, you do need to have the partnerships identified and what they're doing. So are you involving the school? Are you involving a university? Are you involving 4-H? What other organizations are you involving? And are they a program support? Are they a funding support? What is their involvement? It can be a consultation support. You met and talked about your programming effort with a 4-H extension agent, and they gave you advice on how you could use archery as a means of using math, teaching math. Staffing qualifications, you want to identify in there who your staff are. And this can be by title, especially if you're looking at the summer, you may not know who your staff specifically are going to be, but you can say by title and what you anticipate to have as their background. These qualifications do not need to be, they have a bachelor's degree, they have a master's degree in something. It can also be certifications. So there are many certifications that are out there that can be very beneficial to this kind of extended and expanded learning opportunities. And you want to include those. Anticipated participation. None of us have a magic wand to be able to tell what students are going to always show up for the after school setting or the summer enrichment setting. So you're just giving us some anticipated numbers. Who do you, how many do you anticipate to participate in? The issue of the 51% time attendance is really important. That's going to be part of the ESSER grant compliance that we need to look at. And so that's why that's being included. So just look at participation above the halfway mark. We do have the scope document listed here. So this is kind of showing you a screenshot of it, but it's available. You can click on it now. You can touch bases with Rebecca. She can email it to you as well. Can I see a show of hands as how many people have already received or have looked at the scope?
I did send the scope document out with my initial email about this guidance session, but if you didn't get that email or if you don't have the scope document, I can send that Word document to you. Just send me an email. We are also going to be posting these slides on the ESSER ELO website so that you can access these slides later and you can click on the link through the slide. And I posted the link in the chat. My first link didn't work, so I posted a second one. My apologies.
So it looks like most of you, because you're here, did receive that email, but maybe haven't had a chance to look at the scope document. Those of you who did the summer enrichment, it's very similar to that. A few changes, but not that many. But just be sure that you do take a look at that. And again, if you have questions, we can go through that. Okay, next slide. At the end of the scope document, we do have general instructions for each one. I can never anticipate all the questions that will come about, but tried to take a stab at some of them. So just use that as a general guide. You're welcome to leave that at the end of your scope if you want, but you can also cut that section off. And I see we have a, Casey, do we have a question or are you raising the hand from the previous question?
Sorry, just raising my hand from the previous question. And I did put a question in the chat though, whenever you can get to it. It's just about if we need to do a separate program scope, one for the after school and one for the summer program, or if they can be combined into the same program scope.
So you can easily combine them into the same scope, just you have to identify if you're going to separate out, if let's say you're going to do the spring trimester as math and the summer trimester as reading, you just want to make sure that that's clearly identified in your scope. If you're only going to do, if you're going to do the same programming effort for both, then that's fine too. Then it would still be in one document.
Okay,
Good
thanks.
question.
All right. Let's see. There is a question kind of going back a couple slides to schools who received the after school grant and do have some funding left over. Asking how quick of a turnaround can we expect after submitting the ELO application? The district hasn't offered after school programming so far this semester since we returned from winter break, as we want to make sure we're funded before providing those services. And we have more than 15,000 left over in the after school grant.
So if you closed everything out from last year, from the ARP after school program, if you've closed that out and you have funding left over, going forward, you want to apply now for the ELO grant. And we will let you know if you've been awarded by the 17th of February. Maybe sooner, but I can't guarantee before that. You would then be able to use those funds at the beginning of this semester or this trimester.
Thank you.
So these slides are all being, we kind of went over those and they will be part of the handout that will be available on our website, and you can just look at each one. There are about 10 of them that just go through each of those sections I walked through, and they will all be available for you to look at individually. I'm not going to go over them on a slide by slide basis, but they will be included in the handout for you so you can go through that. One thing that is important here is to note the name of the organization in the file name. So when you upload this into the eGrant portal, you do want to have the scope named very specifically with your organization name, program name, ESSER, ARP, EELO, and the scope and the date. That's a very specific naming convention that needs to be used when uploading these. I know that sometimes it's easy to use a scanner and then it comes through as an upload as really interesting long numbers and letters all combined. And that can be challenging to go back and find. So just, you can scan it in if you want, but then rename that file with your organization name and these components to it when you upload it. And again, you're welcome to, before you upload it, to send it to Rebecca and I and say, this is what we're planning to submit. What do you think? We'll be glad to take a look at those. And to answer the question back with how fast can we approve it? The faster you get those scopes to us, the faster we can look at those and we can give you feedback. Okay.
There is a question about the program scope. Is there a maximum character, word, or page count for the program scope? Thought I saw that called out somewhere.
Okay, so that's always one that gets asked. And I know last time in the summer enrichment, we started with 1 page and then we went to 2. And then I said, oh, forget it. Just upload what you want. And that's okay. As long as you can upload it, whatever that document is, that's okay to upload. We've seen some really great scopes done where people have attached, here's the flyer I'm going to use for the summer enrichment piece. Here's the test that we're going to use for the pre and post. And frankly, I'll just say, even though those are in different formats, they're really nice and give us an idea of what you're doing. So that's totally fine. If you've got pictures and you want to say, here's what we're doing in our cooking program, and this is why, you're welcome to include photo galleries as well. Most uploading systems will have a requirement, a maximum of 5 megs to 10. So you may run into that, but not so much a page limit.
And then just again in the chat, you do not need to do a different scope for after school and summer. You can combine both of those in the same scope document, but please make sure that if you are doing different programming efforts in the after school than you are in the summer, that you really specifically lay those differences out in your scope document.
Okay, now we're going to go ahead and transition into eGrants, and I'm going to let Rebecca go ahead and follow with this component.
All right. So in eGrants is where you are going to fill out the actual application for your ELO grant. To access eGrants, I believe most of you who are here right now have received a grant from us before, so you're familiar with this process. But if you're watching this video or reviewing these slides for the first time, then this is how you access eGrants. So you can either go to the OPI website and navigate to leadership and eGrants, or you can click on the direct link, which is linked on this slide. And again, these slides will be available on the OPI website. And then once you get to the eGrants login page, the landing page before you log in is this bottom right screenshot. And there is a lot of important and pertinent information on that page that can help to answer a lot of your questions and save you some time if you have questions. So we encourage you to review those resources. And then if you can't find the answer to your question, then feel free to reach out to us. To find the ELO grant, after you log in to EGrants, you will navigate to fiscal year 2021. And like Wendy said earlier, this is a little bit confusing because currently it's the calendar year 2023. How come we're going back to 2021? This has to do with when the funding was actually established for this grant. It was established in fiscal year 2021. And so that's why you have to navigate back in time to go find the grant. And then if you are finding this grant for the first time, you're going to have to scroll down all the way to the bottom of the page into the available section. These are grants that are available to fill out, but that you haven't started yet. And then the grant name for this Extended Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant is called ESSER Consolidated Special ELO. And that's circled in the screenshot on the right-hand side of your screen. And then to start the application, you're just going to click on the blue Create button that is to the right of that application name. Right. After you click Create, the grant application is going to open, and this is going to be generally what you see. At this point, I am actually going to switch screens, and I'm going to go into EGrants and log in here and walk you through this process.
And while Rebecca's doing that with EGrants, one note I want to make about the slide deck that we'll be providing on our website. With all of these slides, once it's in that slide deck format, you can just do a simple search for, words within it. So if you're getting to a point where you want to go find that grant, you go, oh, I remember that Rebecca and Wendy said something about 2021, and I can't remember where that was. You can just search the document for that and it'll come up with that particular slide. Or if you're looking for the final expenditure report references and the links, again, you can just type in final expenditure report or even FER, and it will take you directly to that hyperlink that then you can go off and see what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So I have gotten EGrants pulled up. I am in the test system of EGrants right now, so that's why there's a green background. If someone could give me just like a yes or a thumbs up in the chat, let me know that you can see my screen in EGrants. I want to make sure that you can actually see what I'm doing. But I have navigated to fiscal year 2021. And I'm scrolling down all the way down to the bottom in this available section where I can see grants that are available for this school or organization. So this is the ESSER Consolidated Special ELO grant. And the Create button is over here on the right-hand side. So when I click the blue Create button, it opens up the grant. And it'll take just a second to load here. Perfect. All right, so when you log in and you create your grant, this is what you're going to see. Note that when you log in, you'll be able to see your LE number and your organization title. You'll see all these blue tabs that you can click between. You'll see this is school year, and it says ESSER Consolidated Special ELO application. So that just helps kind of to center you back to what application am I actually looking at. And then in another window, I have the scope document pulled up, and I'm going to be pulling information from this scope document, and I'll just be pulling information from the instructions page. But you will probably want to have both of these open at the same time. Okay, so in EGrants, the first tab that opens up is this ESSER ELO tab, and there are sub tabs here. There's Overview and Grant Information and Requirements. The Overview tab that opens, if you scroll down and read through this, this is just information about the grant, information about the purpose. There is a link to the ESSER ELO website. So if you were to click this link, it would take you to the ESSER ELO website where we have information, we have resources, guidance, documents, things like that. This is the website where all that information will be posted from today's session. And then there are also lots of links to guidance documents, compliance documents, things like that. And in here, there is also the grant cycle timeline. So those dates are right within the grant application, so that you always have access to them. And yes, as a reminder, this grant application will close January 20th, and we will have grant award notifications out by February 17th. We may be able to get your grant award notification out before that, but we will have those out absolutely by February 17th. So that's the overview tab, just general information. Then the next tab is grant information and requirements. And so this is that eligibility information, grant source funding. We just covered these in the first few slides, and so I'm not going to dive into these super deep, but there are links to helpful information, and this does have the requirements that your organization and your program needs to meet to qualify for this grant. So that's the first tab, ESSER ELO. Then the next tab, and I'm just going to work from left to right here on all these tabs. Next tab is contact information. And if you have filled out an EGrants application before, you may notice that this tab is updated in this grant from previous grants. We got a lot of feedback in previous grants that the contact information page wasn't always the most current information. And so we have some ways in here that you can update this to be the most current information. So just going down, there is an instruction page up at the top that you can use. You will want to put in your unique entity identifier number. And so this is a number that is assigned by the federal government. If you've been doing this for a while, you may be familiar with the term the DUNS number. Previously, it was an identifying number assigned by Dunn and Bradstreet, but the federal government this last year made the decision to change from the DUNS number to a UEI number. So if you have not been assigned a new UEI number, you do need to get that assigned to you before filling out this grant or submitting this grant application. So that UEI number, I'm just going to put this in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It is an 8-digit number. That is unique to your organization. I'm just filling this out as an example, so I just made one up. And then the school district in which the grantee program occurs. So this section right here, this is going to be important for you to think about. If you are a school, let's say that I am filling out this application for the Missoula School District, then I would just put Missoula. But if you represent an organization or a nonprofit or something, some organization that helps to support the school, what we are asking for here is the school district where your organization is located. So what is your local school district? And then you will put the LE number for the school district or your nonprofit number. So I'm just going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 here. Okay. Then as you scroll down, you'll notice this section right here has information for the authorized representative and the district clerk or business manager. First thing I want to point out is you need to fill out what school year this is for. So right now we are in the 2023 school year. So I'm going to put 2023. And then these boxes right here, notice that they are grayed out. That means that these boxes are going to be automatically filled in from an internal OPI contacts database. If you type things into these boxes, they will not save because it's being pulled from an internal database. So in this example, all these boxes are blank. Well, that's not current contact information. I need to make sure to update the contact information. But if this had old contact information, like let's say you had a superintendent or a director who was with your program and then left and this needs to be updated, you can click this checkbox right here, which will pop up a new contact information spot at the bottom of your page. So if these gray boxes are blank or incorrect, you need to check this box here so that you can put in the most current contact information for your organization. And you can do that for both the authorized representative and the district clerk or business manager. I am only going to do this for the authorized representative to save us some time. I'm just going to put in my contact information here. Whoops, 444-0783. By the way, this is my OPI contact phone number. If you ever need to get a hold of me, that is where you can contact me. And my OPI email address is rebecca.brown@mt.gov. So I'll put those in there. And then there's also this section right here that is an alternate contact approval or disapproval email notification. What this is used for is if your authorized representative is ever out of the office or can't be contacted, this is where those alternate notifications are going to be sent so that there's a backup in case the authorized representative is out of the office. So for this example, I'm just going to put xxxx@email.com, but you would put actual contact information for somebody in your organization. Okay, so other things to note are everywhere that has a star is required to be filled out. So right here, notice that there's a star and this hasn't been filled out. And I'm actually going to leave that blank so that you can see the error message that will pop up if you don't fill that out. So I've got everything filled out except for that one section. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and click Save Page so that it can save my changes. Now, I know that I'm going to have a problem here. So when I click Save Page, notice that it pops up at the top. There's this red error message that says contact information must be completed. Hey, I have a blank box right here I need to fix. So I'm going to go 406, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there we go. Now I've got contact information filled out and I'm going to save the page. And oh, contact information must be completed. Let me put this in here.
We are in test, Rebecca, so it may
Yes.
hold differently on that point.
Yep. Okay, there we go. I just left that box blank. My bad. So now my contact information page is done and I have saved it. This is super, super, super important. If you don't save your page and you click to go to another tab, everything that you entered but didn't save will be gone. It won't be saved. So you have to click that Save Page button. Okay. Next tab is this Allocations tab. And notice right now, my allocations when I'm logged in are $0 in both after school and summer. And I've already gotten some questions about this, and thank you for those questions. Thank you for paying attention. Your allocation will be $0 when you fill out this application, because we need to know, is your school or organization applying for after school only? Are you applying for summer only, or are you applying for both? So we couldn't preload your allocation without knowing what you are applying for. So this will be $0 right now, and then we will load your application after you are awarded the grant. So this is not a cause for concern, but just be aware of that. All right. Next section is this program detail tab, and this is where you are going to be spending a lot of your time. The program detail tab is where you're going to fill in a lot of the information from your scope document. There are 3 tabs: site information, performance goals and strategy, and program abstract scope. So I'll start with site information. This is where you are putting information about where you are located, what your students' numbers and demographics kind of look like. So I'm just going to say my program name is ABC Smiles. That's that's my program name. Or organization name, and then the name of your program. So if my organization is ABC Smiles and my program name is ABC After School, I would put organization name and then an arrow and then ABC, ABC After School. And that separates, here's what my organization's called, here's what my program is called. Then the date range that you are applying for, this is where you are indicating to us, am I applying for expanded school day? So that's the after school, spring 23, or are you expanding for extended school year? So that's the summer timeline, or are you applying for both? Check all that apply. So let's say I'm going to apply for both in here. All right, that is just a checkbox. You need to click on it to check it. All right. Oh, I do see a question in the chat that said, what happens if I can't get a new number by the deadline date? I think that question is asking about that UEI number, the unique identifier number from the federal government. If that is the case, please just communicate with Wendy or I, and we can process your application and then have you go in and amend it later when you do get that number. So just communicate with us. We are reasonable, understanding people. Let us know if there's any issues. All right.
Just to add to that, with any of the numbers or any of the required fields, it's a good idea to go through the application sooner rather than later and to identify what things are missing so that you have sort of a checklist of these are all the things I already have. I know I can get quickly. These are all the things that may be a little bit challenging. Reach out now for those how-tos, or how do I process this? Where do I get it? Those kinds of information, so that you start that process going. If you wait until the 19th and it's due on the 20th, that's going to be very challenging to meet those requirements.
Perfect, thank you. So continuing with this site information page.
And I'm going to stop for just 1 minute. We have Mindy. Are you going to add to that comment with the UEIs? You're muted, Mindy.
Yeah, no. Okay. So the one thing that, and Rebecca, I don't know if you just did this because you were chomping on keys, but it's very important that the organization's name and any file name that you pull up has to be, can't have any sort of special characters in it, anything like that. Because sometimes we will get applications that that have put their names in, and instead of putting a dot for what you're going to name this file, you use the @ sign, and that will not work. Okay, you can only put just your name, nothing else, no zeros or anything in it.
Perfect, thank you, Mindy. Continuing with this site information tab. So I've said I'm going to apply for both the extended and expanded, the spring and the summer. And notice here, there is an expanded school day section and an extended school year section. So if you are only applying for one and not the other, please make sure that you are putting information in the correct section. So I'm applying for both. So I'm going to say number of anticipated students to be served. I'll just say 1, 2, 3 here. How many anticipated students do I expect to attend? 51% of the time programming is offered. So it'd be wonderful if all of my students attended all of the time, but we know that that's not realistic. So give us your best estimate based on past programming attendance, or what you expect your attendance to be. So I'm just going to estimate and say 100 here. And then based on your number of anticipated students, how many of them do you expect to be considered low income? Remember that there is a requirement that you serve low income qualifying students. And so based on my community demographics, my previous attendance demographics, I am going to estimate that number. I'll just say, actually, I'll say, what's half of that? 60. All right. But you will estimate this based on your program. And then since I'm doing both, I'm just going to put the same numbers in here to save us some time, and move forward. All right, next section asks, which indicator will you be using to verify that 40% of your students are considered low income? And then it says select all that apply. So if you're using one or more of these, you can check multiple boxes. Okay, so let's say I'm going to use free and reduced lunch. There's also, you can use the E-rate program, different source such as scholarship or financial assistance data. Or if you are using a data source that isn't listed here, then check this other box and put your explanation in here. You can use up to 1,000 characters. So you've got plenty of room to describe that. Okay. Next section down says check each box that applies to how the grant funds will be used. So how are you intending to use these grant funds? All right, so I am providing activities, programming that promotes overall learning acceleration and learning loss recovery, intensive academic interventions such as tutoring in math and reading, student wellness, physical health and safety, mental health, professional development for my instructional staff, instructional support for the curriculum or program development that is focused on math and reading, and then coordination between partner agencies such as schools, youth development and education community organizations, health and social services, etc. Remember, there is a big emphasis on partnership with this grant. And we encourage you to apply that information in here. And then if you have other uses that aren't described in these upper check boxes, you can check this box, and then you have 1,000 characters here to describe. And then again, all the way down at the bottom of the page, make sure you save the page and look up at the top, see, are there any error messages? No, I don't have an error message, so I can move on with my life. So next tab, after I finish site information, there's performance goals and strategy. All right. In this section, first question asks, how does this program or project align with your participant school district's ESSER ARP plan? All right, so if you are a school district, you're filling this out as Missoula School District. Awesome. How does your program connect to your school plan? That should be pretty clear. But if you are a nonprofit or a community organization and you are partnering with your school district, this is where you show how does your program support your local school district in their published ESSER ARP plan. And you can find school district plans on their websites. You can contact your local school district to find their plan. And then we also have information on that on our OPI website right here. And so if you are representing more than one school district, like you are one of those organizations with multiple locations, make sure that you note how you're supporting each individual school district. All right, so I'm just going to pull up my scope document, and I am just going to copy and paste some information in here so that I can save us some time. All right. Next question says list objectives and strategies. So you're going to be using those SMART objectives. Remember, SMART stands for specific, measurable, ambitious but achievable, realistic, and then the time you'll achieve it by. Remember that this grant does have a timeline that needs to be met. So that really needs to be a consideration in here. And so you have performance goal and strategy 1, performance goal and strategy 2. And so I'm just going to come down in here into my goals and objectives. And I'm going to just copy and paste. And again, I'm just saving us time here for this video. You are going to put a whole lot more in here than just program goal strategy 1 and 2. And then finally, general approaches to reaching those objectives. So if your answer in here doesn't fully specify your overall general approach to your curriculum, your programming, your instruction, you're going to put that information in here. So let's see. Just copy some information and paste. All right, now I've got all my boxes filled out. Notice that it does count the characters that you've used. You can use up to 2,000 characters here. And again, we know that that character limit can be challenging. And so that is part of why you're also filling out the scope document at the same time. All right, so I'm going to save the page. Are there any error message? No error messages, so I can move on with my life. All right. Good question in the chat. If a school is a recipient of the 21st Century Learning Grant, is that school eligible for the ELO grant? The answer to your question is yes, you are eligible to apply for this ELO grant. But if there is a limited amount of funds, and so priority may be given to schools and organizations who have not received those other funding sources like 21st Century or the larger overall ELO or ESSER grants or Carl Perkins or things like that. So yes, you're eligible to apply, but receiving other funding will be considered in your grant application and award. So just keep that in mind. All right. And then good note from Mindy, please make sure that you save the page and then scroll all the way up and check, are there error messages? Because if you don't address an error message now, it won't let you submit your application. So you want to check on every page. The next tab is this program abstract scope. All right. First thing is uploading your scope document. So your scope must contain the answers to all the items listed in the grant requirements. It must be uploaded as a PDF file. Please be very specific about this. When you are working on your scope document, if it's a Word document, you will need to go File, Save As, and change it to a PDF file. All right, so just keep that in mind. That is a requirement for your EGrants application. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to choose a PDF file. And again, I'm just doing this to save time, but I will upload that file. And notice when I do that, I have error messages up at the top. I uploaded the file, but I didn't complete all of the sections down below. So sometimes you'll get error messages as you're going through, and that's okay. You just need to fix them. All right. So continuing downward, abstract, this is a summary of your program in 500 words. Again, I am just going to copy and paste some information from my scope to save us time. Okay, so there's your abstract. If you had to sum up your program in 500 words, sum it up right here. Then program evaluation, how your performance goals, student outcomes, and indicators for success are going to be evaluated. Okay. Copy, paste. Professional development, how are you going to train your staff as providing this program effort? Professional development is an allowable use of these funds, and it's actually encouraged. So put that in here. Your timeline, what is your program implementation timeline for fall 22, spring 23, summer 23? Again, note, this ends at the end of summer 23. Once September 23 starts, that is getting into a new grant cycle, and there will be a new application for that grant cycle. All right. So this is only going through summer 23. Be specific which trimesters your program will involve. You can copy paste from your scope document. And again, if you are doing different programming in the school year than you are during the summer, that needs to be specifically laid out here. Okay. Next section says evidence-based instruction and intervention. How are you going to use that evidence-based instruction or intervention to obtain those goals and objectives for your program? Next question asks about program operations. How is your program going to be set up? Student population, grade levels, number of students, appropriate staffing, engaging activities, optimizing use of time, targeting program goals and objectives. All that information that can be in your scope document, and you can copy and paste it into here. And so now I've got all these text boxes filled out. Lower down, transportation and financial barriers to participation. We recognize we live in the state of Montana. It is a very big state, and our people are pretty spread out in a lot of areas of the state. So how are you going to ensure that financial barriers and transportation barriers will be addressed in your program? So there's some suggested options here. And then if you're going to do a few of these, and then you have something else that you're going to do that's not listed here, click the other box and type into this text box. All right. And then the last question down at the bottom is safety and well-being. Describe the safety and health procedures you have in place that ensure your students are in a safe and healthy environment. This needs to describe child protection mechanisms as well as preventing, preparing for, and responding to COVID. This funding is available through the ESSER grants, and this prepare, prevent, respond, that is the intent of the ESSER grant. So you do need to have that information in here. So again, I'm just going to copy and paste to save us some time. So now I've got all the sections filled out. I have this uploaded. So in theory, I won't have any error messages when I click save page. So I clicked save page, I go up to the top, all those red error messages disappeared. So I know this page is good. I can move forward with my life. Next tab in this application is the Assurances tab. When you click on the Assurances tab, there are 3 sub tabs here, and these are the compliance pieces that you must read, understand, and agree to for this grant. The first one, common assurances for federal programs. It says right here, these pages are common assurances required by federal law that apply to all federal programs. Some of these assurances may not specifically make sense to your program. It may not apply if it's talking about construction and you're not constructing anything. That's okay, but you do need to read all of these, you need to understand all of them, and you do need to comply with them. These are federal compliances that are related to using federal grant money. All right, so after you read through all of them, there are hyperlinks in several parts that can take you to external sources. You do need to check the box up at the top of the page and then scroll down, and it'll automatically fill. When you check that box, it'll fill this box in, and it says agreed to on 1/5/22. That is not today's date. I had actually come in here and reviewed the application before, so that's why this date doesn't match. But it'll match when you check that box. All right, so that's the common assurances page. And notice there's no save page button, but when I check that box, it automatically loads information into the last tab. So this tab is good. Next tab is the extended learning assurances. These are assurances that are more closely related to this extended expanded learning opportunity grant. These are not the same assurances as in the previous tab. We're not duplicating them. It's just additional compliance pieces that you do need to be aware of. You need to read them, understand them, and then follow them. And again, we do have hyperlinks on some of these and reference the actual law. So read through those, and then after you understand them, you'll check the box and then scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you have to click LEA agrees. So this is essentially like your save button on this page. So click LEA agrees. Notice that button went away after I clicked it. And then this tab is good. I can go to the final assurances agreement tab. And this tab, these checkboxes automatically fill in after I check the box on the first 2 tabs. So notice I've got 2 checkboxes that are automatically filled in. I'm good. I need to click legal entity agrees. And when I click legal entity agrees, it automatically fills in this box here, and that button goes away. So now my assurances are complete. All right, moving over further to the right, the amendment description tab. This only becomes applicable after you have received the grant and you are amending your grant application. So right now, there's nothing to do in the amendment description tab. All right. The next tab is the submit tab. And this is where you will go in to actually submit your application. Now, I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to go to some different parts of this application that we haven't gotten to yet. All right. The application history tab. After you submit your application, it will show the history of who created the application, who ran a consistency check, who submitted it, who reviewed it at OPI. All that history will be shown here. All right. Page lock control. After you submit an application, it locks the application. So you'll need to go in here and unlock it. This is not applicable right now when you're first filling out the application, but it may become applicable later on. This tab right here, application print, this may be helpful to you, useful to you right now. The application print tab allows you to print selected pages or all of the pages within your grant application. So if you're filling this out and you want to take it to a board meeting tonight before you submit the application, you can print it out here. You'll go to the application print tab, you'll click which pages you want to print, and then you'll click on the button that says request print. Now, if you use this aspect of EGrants, this application print tab, it will send your print request to the server. It will be prepared and it'll be ready for you at the top of the hour. So right now it's 10:30. If I were to click request print right now, it wouldn't be ready until 11 o'clock. And it'll email you that you've requested your application to be printed, and it'll be ready at the top of the hour. Then you can come back in here and it'll let you download it, okay? If you don't want to wait an hour to print out your application, that's understandable. There's another way to do it, and it's this right here. Up in the top right-hand side of your screen, there is a small section of words that says printer friendly. If you click on that, I'm gonna open it in a new tab. If you click on that, it'll open a printer friendly version of your page, and then you can click Control P and it'll print on your printer on your computer. Now you will have to do that for every single page you want to print, but it is faster than waiting for an hour for EGrants to print it for you. So just be aware you do have two different print options. The other place, whoops. There we are, sorry. The other place that I wanted to take you is this drop-down menu right here. Notice this drop-down allows you to access program-specific pages. Okay, right now it says ESSER Extended Expanded Learning Opportunity, but if I click, there's ELO After School and ELO Summer. These are where you go to find your budget pages. Now, again, I said this before, right now, your budget is $0. You do not have an allocation. Your allocation is $0 until you get awarded the grant and we load your allocation. So after you get awarded the grant, this is where you will go to find your budget. In the meantime, before you can fill out this budget page, you are going to fill out your budget on your scope document. So that's super, super important for you to remember, is that your budget page will just say $0, and that's okay. Your scope document needs to have that budget detail. All right. So then I'm going to go back to Extended Expanded Learning Opportunity. I am ready to submit. I don't have any error messages on my tabs. So now I go to the Submit tab. Notice first thing it says is the consistency check must be successfully processed before the application can be submitted to OPI. So what that tells me is I need to click on consistency check right here. So I'll click on consistency check. The check is running. EGrants is looking through all of the different assurances, compliances, the text boxes that needed to be filled in, and looking for any errors. All right. If there are errors on this page, they'll pop up right here and they'll say, hey, your contact information isn't complete, or you didn't fill in this text box, or whatever that means. If there are any error messages here, you will not be able to submit your application until you fix those errors. But since you watched me fill this all out, there are no error messages. Now it says click Submit to OPI button to make the final submission for review and approval. And it does show who ran the consistency check. It locked the application on today at this time. If I needed to unlock the application to make changes, I could, but I don't need to make changes. So I'm going to click on Submit to OPI, and then you get congratulations. The application has been submitted to OPI for review. And now the application comes over to the OPI side. We will review it and we will contact you if we have questions. So at this point, that is the EGrants application. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint slides and pick back up where we left off. So let me know if you can't see my slide, but right now I'm showing you how to check where your application is in the workflow. When you are in the eGrants Access Select page, there are different status options that show where your application is at. It'll say if it's not submitted. If it's been submitted for local review, that means it's been submitted to your authorized representative, but your AR needs to review and submit to OPI. If it says submitted to OPI, that's self-explanatory. It's over on our side and we need to review it. Final approved means that OPI has approved it and returned it back to you. So it's approved, you can move forward. And then the last one says returned for changes. So if we review it, there's edits needed. We will return it to you for changes. You can make those edits and then resubmit. After we return it to you, you can see feedback on your application. So you'll go to that eGrants Access Select page, and over on the right-hand side, there is a blue button that says Review Summary. When you click on Review Summary, it'll open up this review summary page where you can see the different steps that the review has gone through. And then notice there's a bubble next to the OPI review. You'll click on that bubble, click on review checklist. And then at this point, eGrants will open a second tab in your browser. You have to have your pop-up blockers turned off in order to see that second tab open up. But in that second tab, you'll see this checklist where OPI leaves feedback if there is feedback necessary for you. So in here, you can see the feedback that was left on these 3 amendments. They were all okay, and we've initialed who reviewed those amendments. If you needed to make changes, that would be shown in here. It would say, please update your contact information, or please update your programming scope, or whatever that feedback is. Error messages in eGrants. We offered a training on error messages in October. Mindy did an excellent presentation showing specific error messages and how to fix them. That link is on this slide, which will be posted on our ESSER website. It'll also, this slide will be posted on our website, and the October slides with those error messages, those are already on our website. So you can go back and review those if you need. Read those error messages carefully. They are phrased to tell you exactly what you need to fix. So read them carefully. And then before calling OPI for help, before you panic, check these 3 things. Number 1, are you using Chrome or Microsoft Edge for your browser? Those are the best browsers for eGrants. eGrants doesn't play nice with the other ones. Make sure your browsing history and your cookies have been cleared, because that can cause problems with eGrants. And then make sure your pop-up blockers are off. If all 3 of those are true and taken care of, and you're still getting an error message, now call OPI. We'll be happy to help you. Error messages will appear in 2 places, either on the individual tab after you click Save Page. So you saw this when I was filling out the contact information page. It showed up right at the top of that page. Or on the Submit tab after you run a consistency check. If there's any error messages, it'll show up on that Submit tab. A common error message that we get questions about is if your page is locked. So you submitted it and then OPI sent it back to you to make edits. You will have to unlock the pages before you can make those edits and resubmit. So you'll go to the Page Lock Control tab at the top of the screen, click on Expand All and Select All to unlock all of your pages, and then make sure you click Save at the bottom of the screen. And then the other place I showed you earlier, you can unlock the application from the Submit tab after you run the consistency check. And then when you are reading through error messages, read them carefully. Notice in this error message up at the top, there are problems that need to be fixed, but this last one, it says this page passed the consistency check. So that's not a problem, that's good to submit. So just read those carefully. They don't always necessarily mean you did everything wrong. So read carefully. Then you have completed your eGrants application, you have submitted it, OPI has reviewed it and approved it and award you the grant. Once your school or organization is awarded the ELO grant, you can begin submitting cash requests for reimbursement. You will have to request reimbursement through those cash requests in order to be paid through the grant. We have about a 20-minute video on on cash requests on our OPI website, which is linked on this slide right here. Please make sure that you are submitting cash requests on at least a monthly basis. So like if you are using this to help pay your instructors, or you're ordering supplies or things like that, please do not batch all of your expenses together as one huge cash request. Make them individual cash requests, or a few at a time on a monthly basis. Please don't save everything until the end. And then make sure to submit the cash requests in the correct budget page after school versus summer, as remember, those have different timelines. So I'm going to show you that again on the EGrants application. You have these two different budget pages. One budget page is for after school, which will end at the end of May 23, and then summer is from June through August of 23. So if you receive both allocations and you submit a cash request in summer that was actually used to pay for something in after school, those two funding sources can't cross. You have to make sure that you apply that in the correct budget page. So be aware of that. And then if absolutely necessary throughout the course of this couple of trimesters, you can amend your grant application. OPI guidance on amendments is linked right here. Ideally, you wouldn't have to amend your grant application, but we recognize that sometimes changes have to be made and challenges come up. So if you do get into a spot where you're like, I think I need to make changes to my application, please just reach out. We're more than happy to help you through that process. After you're awarded your grant, you can see the grant award notification on that eGrants Access Select page. It's next to each grant you've been awarded under the status column, and it's in blue. It says View GAN. And if the grant is under revision, so like, for example, if you've submitted it, but it hasn't been approved yet, or you're still in the process of amending it, that GAN will not display because the grant hasn't been finalized. Once the grant is finalized, then you'll be able to see the GAN again. So just be aware of that. And then also please be aware of the timeline for submitting a cash request specifically. Please realize we review hundreds of amendments and cash requests on a monthly basis. We help over 400 Montana school districts and agencies, and all of these requests take time to process. So please be patient with us, and please be aware of that while you are waiting for our approval. We do have templates that we suggest you use. I'll share those later on in this slide. And then always look at the feedback that we leave on your amendments or cash requests. Specifically, cash requests need to be submitted by the 25th of the month in order to be paid by the 10th of the next month. So right now it is January 12th. We are past the 10th of the month. So payments went out on the 10th, but we are before the 25th. So if you were to submit a cash request today, that would be before the 25th deadline, and that could be paid out as soon as February 10th. But if we get to January 26th and you submit a cash request on the 26th, well, that's after the 25th deadline. So that probably won't be paid out until the next 10th of the month, which would be January, February, March 10th. So just be aware of that. There is a delay between when you submit the cash request and when it can be paid out. All right. And then for those cash requests and the final expenditure report later on, you will use the payments menu. From that eGrants Access Select page, you'll click on the blue payments button next to your grant to see the payment summary page, which shows you how much you've been allocated, how much you've spent, etc. And then you can go in and specifically view the cash requests or expenditure reports. When you are going in to create a cash request, remember you have to select which budget page you're creating that cash request for. And the same thing will happen for the expenditure report at the end of the grant. And then individual cash requests, after you have created and submitted a cash request, if you want to go back in and look at that cash request, you'll just select the cash request and then click Open Request. To create a cash request, again, we have about a 20-minute guidance video walking you through step by step how to do this process. That is linked right here on this slide. But you'll go through, you'll select the correct budget page, you'll create the new request. You will select the you'll go in and you'll create a line item for each item that you are requesting reimbursement for. You'll make sure to fill in the object code, use of funds, expenditure description. Really important, this needs to match what is in your grant application. If your grant application says we are going to be using these funds for salaries and benefits for our instructors and to help pay for some of our curriculum and to help pay for specifically, we're going to purchase 3 Chromebooks for students. That's what it says in your grant application. But when you submit the cash request, it's something entirely different. Like, oh yeah, we're purchasing 100 iPads. That wasn't in your grant application. That doesn't match. We can't approve that. It has to match what's in your grant application. So just pay specific attention to that. All right. And then if and when it comes time for you to have to change your grant application, make an amendment, those changes have to follow a specific process. And we really encourage you to use this template to describe that amendment. And again, we do have guidance on that amendment process, which is posted earlier in this slide deck.
And I'm going to add very cautiously there on the amendments. These are very specific targeted grants. It would be unlikely for you to have amendments. We include it in here because we know some of you may be running other grants, but we do not anticipate doing amendments on these grants at all. So it would be the rare exception that an amendment would be approved.
Yep. And then on this slide, we have lots of resources posted to help you in your consideration and your creation of your program and your grant application. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but this is a great place for you to get started finding some of the answers for your questions. And again, this slide is going to be posted on our ESSER ELO webpage for you to access later on. We do have lots of resources on our OPI webpage. So if you go to opi.mt.gov, that takes you to the main OPI homepage, and then you can go to the ESSER webpage, and then there's a button that you can click to take you to the ELO grant, or you can just go directly to the ELO webpage. We have the link right here on this slide. It was emailed out to you in the registration emails for this session, and there is lots of information and resources on that webpage for you that is specific to this ELO grant. And then also on this slide, I just have the direct link for the EGrants login page if you need that. And then finally, on this slide, we have contact information for the ESSER team. So we have a few different people on the team who can help answer different aspects of questions. If you have questions about the ESSER grant, the ELO grant, your program, things like that, feel free to reach out to me or Wendy, and we can help answer those questions or discuss those challenges with you. If after you get awarded the grant, if you have questions about creating, submitting, or editing cash requests or final expenditure reports, you will contact Steve Morgan. He's the ESSER grant accountant, and he can help to answer those questions. And then if you have specific EGrants technical support questions, you can direct those questions to Mindy Askelson. She works on our EGrants technical support staff. She helped to design and build this application in EGrants, but ESSER and ELO are not the only grants that Mindy helps with, and so try to just ask her questions about EGrants, and then ESSER or ELO questions can come to me. So we are going to stay on this slide. Our contact information is here. Feel free to take a screenshot, write it down. I'll also email this out to you folks. And at this point, we are going to stop recording, and we are going to open